Welcome back from the ad break, and let's continue with our lesson. So now we are going to look at the first point on our concept map, and that is parallel lines. But before we can look at the parallel lines, let's look at the pairs of angles when we have non-parallel lines. So firstly, we have corresponding angles. Now, corresponding angles are angles which occupy the same relative position at each intersection where a transversal line crosses two or more lines. Then we have alternate angles. We have interior alternate and exterior alternate, where these are angles that occur on opposite sides of a transversal line between or inside the lines that it cuts. Then we have co-interior angles, and these are angles on the same side of the transversal line between the two lines that it cuts. When it comes to co-exterior angles, these are angles on the same side of the transversal on the outside of the lines, the two lines that it cuts. Now let's look at practically where these angles are. So remember, corresponding angles, they occupy the same relative position. Alternate angles, they are on opposite sides of the transversal, and co-interior, co-exterior, they are either in between the two parallel lines on the same side of the transversal or outside of the two lines, in between any two lines on the same side of the transversal or outside of the two lines that the transversal cuts on the same side of the transversal. So let's look at the following diagram where we will see if we can identify those pairs of angles. So those are the corresponding angles, the alternate angles, and the co-interior or co-exterior angles. So we have two lines there, line AB and line PQ. Now these lines are not parallel, but they do have a transversal that is cutting them, which is line LM. So remember, which ones are the corresponding angles? Corresponding angles are angles that occupy the same relative space, so on the same side of the transversal. So when we are looking there, we can see that angle A and angle E are both under the lines that are being cut by the transversal. So that means that those two lines are corresponding. And of course, there are more angles that are corresponding there. What about the alternate angles? Remember, the alternate angles are the ones that are on the opposite side of the transversal. So if we're talking about the interior alternate, we are talking about angle A and angle G, as we can see that they are on the opposite sides of the transversal, but they are on the inside of those transversal. That would be the interior alternate angles. And when we're talking about the exterior alternate angles, we would still be looking at the angles that are on the opposite side of the transversal, but now they are on the outside of the lines that are being cut. So what about the co-interior angles? Remember, co-interior angles are on the same side of the transversal and between the two lines that are being cut. So those would be the co-interior angles. And when we're looking at the co-exterior angles, they are on the same side of the transversal, but on the outside of the lines that are being cut. So as shown there, we can see that angle A and angle H are co-interior, as we have just discussed. Then angle C and angle F are co-exterior. Then we have angle G and angle A. They are interior alternate. Then we have angle C and angle E, and they are exterior alternate, as we have just discussed. And of course, there are those corresponding angles there, as we can see A and E are corresponding. Angle B and angle F are corresponding angles. Angle C and angle G are corresponding angles. And angle D and angle H are corresponding angles because they occupy the same relative space. So this is when these are the pairs of angles, corresponding alternate and co-interior and co-exterior, when lines are not parallel. So what's the difference when it comes to parallel lines? So parallel lines, firstly, are lines that have the same inclination or slope. That means they have the same gradient. So for example, line AB and line PQ are parallel. They are cut by the transversal LM. So when we're talking about corresponding angles, when the lines are parallel, remember, corresponding angles are now the angles that occupy the same relative position at each intersection where a transversal line crosses two or more parallel lines. So when we have corresponding angles, and those corresponding angles are there when they are parallel lines, then that means that those two corresponding angles will be equal. Let's look at the following angles there. As we've seen before, but now the difference is that our line AB and our line PQ are now parallel. Now, which angles are corresponding? We have angle A and angle E. They occupy the same relative space. So that means that angle A and angle E will be equal. And the reason for this is because they are corresponding angles and because AB is parallel to PQ. The same can be said about angle B and angle F. They are corresponding, they are corresponding, and we have parallel lines, which means that they will be equal. Of course, then we have angle G and angle C, and we also have angle D and angle H. Because they are parallel lines and because they are corresponding, that means that they are equal. Let's look at a calculation that is with corresponding angles where there are parallel lines. So calculate the values of x and y. Let's look at angle x. It occupies the same relative space as 160 degrees. So that means that angle x and that 160 degrees are equal. Why are we saying this? Because one, the angles are corresponding. So these are corresponding angles, and on top of that, it is because AB is parallel to PQ, and that is why those two angles are equal. What about Y? Now when we're looking at Y, we have Y there, and it is corresponding with 20, and because they are parallel lines, that means that they are equal. And we can say that Y is equal to 20 degrees, and this is because of they are corresponding angles. AB is parallel to PQ. What about when we have co-interior angles and co-exterior angles? Now remember, co-interior angles are angles that are in between two parallel lines that are intersected by a transversal on the same side of the transversal. And when it comes to the co-exterior angles, they are also on the same side of a transversal, but they are outside the two parallel lines. And co-interior angles are supplementary as well as co-exterior angles. And remember what supplementary means? It means that they add up to 180 degrees. So this means that since we can see that angle A and angle H are in between two parallel lines on the same side of the transversal, this means that they add up to 180. Of course, they are not the only co-interior angles that are there. We also have angle B and angle G, which means that they also add up to 180. And this is only because we have them between two parallel lines. The same can be said about the co-exterior angles, that is on the outside of the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. They are also supplementary, and the same can be said about angle E and angle D because they are exterior co-exterior angles, which means they add up to 180 degrees. Let's look at a practical example. Now we are looking at angle P, and as we can see there, angle P is co-interior with 120 degrees. What does this mean? It means that P plus 120 degrees will give us 180 degrees. So for us to find P, we can use the additive inverse of 120, and we can say there that it is 180 minus 120 degrees. Now our reason for this will be that these are co-interior angles, and we are only saying that they are supplementary because AB is parallel to PQ. So this means that our angle for P will be 60 degrees. Then we are looking at angle Q, and if we are looking at angle Q is also co-interior with angle 60, which means that Q plus 60 degrees will give us 180 degrees. Now, how do we find Q? By using the additive inverse of 60 degrees. So we are going to say 180 degrees minus the 60 degrees, and that is because of the co-interior angles where AB is parallel to PQ. That means that Q is going to be equals to 120 degrees. And lastly, we have angle R. And if we look at angle R, it is co-exterior with the 60 degrees. That means that the R plus the 60 degrees is going to give us 180 degrees. So that means that we can say 180 degrees minus the 60 degrees. That means that our R is going to be equals to 120 degrees. And this is because of the co-exterior angle. So the co-exterior angles, and this is only because they are supplementary, and they are only supplementary because AB is parallel to PQ. Let's quickly go to an ad break, and then we'll see you just now.